Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us in the QAAFI Science Series for today. It's a great pleasure to be able to introduce Professor Daniel Rodriguez. So Daniel is a professor in farming systems and agronomy. So I'm, as many of you know, and if you don't, I'm Ian Godwin. So I'm the Centre Director for the Centre for Crop Science. So Daniel is originally from Argentina. He went to the Netherlands where he did his Masters and PhD in Wageningen, which, as you know, is the #1 ranked university in agriculture in the world. So that's where we're going to be soon, we hope. After doing some postdocs at Wageningen, Daniel came out to Australia. He joined Dept in 2005. And in 2010, when QAAFI actually was started, he was one of the founding members of QAAFI. So I'd like to acknowledge country now. So the University of Queensland acknowledges the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet. We pay our respects to ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognise their valuable contributions to Australia and global society. So I just wanted to let people know that before Daniel kicks off is that we welcome people to ask questions. You can ask questions at any time, which will be asked at the end. And I just want to remind people that not to use the chat function for the Q&A. So there is a Q&A button. So if you enter your questions in Q&A, if you can identify yourself, that's great. If you prefer not to, that's okay too. So Daniel, over to you.
Thank you. We got a little mixed up there with the slides. Well, the title of this presentation is Untangling Genotype by Management by Interactions in Multi-Environment On-Farm Experimentation. Before we start, I like also to acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodianship of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their ancestors and their descendants. So this seminar, it's summarizing some of the results not only of this article, but a couple of more articles. So I try to go a little bit general rather than to the specifics of how things have been done. I guess the main motivation for the work relates to, we know that global climate variability accounts for roughly 1/3 of the observed yield variability. And you can see here in this, for wheat at least in this global map, that all the orange is sitting on Australia. And that reflects basically that in Australia, climate variability accounts for 60% of the variability in wheat yields. So it is quite significant. And also we do know that the climate has warmed by about 1.4 degrees since 1910. And that has been associated to some changes in the patterns in which it has been raining. Some areas have been increasing and some areas have been staying the same, which if you match the increase in temperature with the stay the same or reduction in rainfall, you are likely to expect more drought, the incidence of more drought and more severe drought stresses. And in association to that, we have seen already an increase in the frequency of extreme heat events. So basically, this is important because this is what basically climate variability and ongoing climate change is giving us a clear focus and mission in increasing crop adaptation. And when I talk about crop, I'm going to be basically talking about the crop design concept, the combination of genetics and management. So I guess the main objective of this work on crop adaptation is how systems agronomy can help. And the way that we can help, we think, is to help identify and inform those best fit combinations of genetics and management to site and unexpected seasonal conditions, so that farmers can make better informed decisions and increase yields and reduce risks. And there are a number of levers that we can play with in the range of genetics and the management. Genetics that comes from different materials that we can select that are characterized by having different characteristics in terms of maturity, tillering propensity, in the case of sorghum, etc. And in the case of management, as you can imagine, there are many things that farmers can do just to try to adapt that genetics to the expected environmental conditions. And when we are talking about environmental conditions, we know there are things that we do know that we don't know, but there are things that we know that are knowable, that we can know, we can measure, and things that we don't know, rainfall distribution and rainfall, when it's going to rain, how much it's going to rain. Really, that has been the key issue. Same with the occurrence of heat stresses. And in addition, also markets are just, fluctuating and it's another dimension to variability in farmers' profits. But there are things that we know, or that we should be able to know quite clearly, and that is basically soil type, soil moisture, soil fertility, and those things that farmers can measure that. So those are deterministic variables. You can go and measure. You have a single variable, a single number. But also there are other variables like you have climatology, and you have trends, and you have forecasts. That you're not going to have a single variable, but it's primarily some stochastic results. So you're going to have to deal with probabilities. So whenever we are dealing with the environment, we're going to have to deal with probabilities. So let's see how we can see what is this G by M and why we do care about this. So does G by M matter at all? And when I'm talking about G by M here, I'm talking about G, the hybrid. M is just the single plant population. And when I'm talking about the E, is basically the results from multi-environment trials where we have different sites, different seasons, and different times of sowing, because the different times of sowing are going to be creating those different environments as well. And those sites in the data sets that I'm going to be talking about are just basically all along the eastern border of Australia, on what is known as the sorghum cropping region, which is that in yellow. So I have very much indicated what are the key areas where we are running this research. So does G by M matter? Well, you tell me. Here is a result of the last 2 or 3 years of sorghum trials across eastern Australia. And it shows the yield of different treatments on the y-axis versus the average of the site or the environment yield down in the x-axis. And I'm calling that the E, and I'm calling these the G by M. And when you look at a decile 9 and the decile 1 regression lines, the intervals between those two are giving you a 66% difference in grain yield. And that is just the G by the M. And what is interesting is that when you translate that into water, so water availability, so those lines become water use efficiencies, it varies between very little to about expected values, about 16 to 17 kilograms per millimeter per hectare. So, and that is basically an 8-fold change in water use efficiency. So G by M does matter. And there are things that we can do with this information. There are things that we can explore further. For example, it is going to be really interesting if we can say, okay, what are those G by M combinations that are sitting at the top of those lines, at the top of this line, this is the upper tercile, the middle tercile, or the lower tercile. And the same with the water use efficiency. It probably should be the same points. But also we can learn from the things that we didn't work really very well. So you can also learn from things that gave you the worst result in the lower tercile, middle, and upper tercile. So those things are not too difficult to obtain. So we can probably know pretty easily what is the best G by M combination if we knew in advance what is likely to be the environment. So in hindsight, knowing what is the optimum G by M combination is not too difficult. The main problem is that we have very little information on what is likely to be the expected environment. Are we going to be sitting down here, down there, or down there? And I'm also dividing things into terciles to make it very simple, because I don't think that we need much more detail than that to make reasonable decisions on identifying what are these optimal combinations. If I know I'm going to be just in the middle tercile environments that are going to be yielding between 4 and 6 tons, more or less I know what is likely to be the best G by M combination. So a lot of the discussion today is going to be about how we can tease out this E down here. So there are a number of approaches we have followed. We are working with SAGI and applying linear mixed models, obviously, but also we are doing something pretty innovative, which is taking some of the learnings from those scientists that have been working on adding covariates to the G by E and bring that to the G by E by M. So we are adding the M. And so that is an interesting work that is ongoing at the moment. I'm going to show some results on that. Another approach is obviously to use the estimated means just to explore functional crop eco-physiological relationships that improve the science and on stress adaptation and also help us improve APSIM. And then we can use APSIM to basically extrapolate results across sites and seasons and to derive measures of risk for the different combinations and environments. So in addition to that, we are also applying data mining and artificial intelligence techniques just to derive simple rules of thumbs for farmers and consultants that could be used. That they wouldn't need a big model, but they use the data from the models. And we are also exploring the use of, for example, combining seasonal climate forecasts that are supposed to be very skillful with crop models and to inform these G by M combinations and try to help bridge yield gaps. So I'm going to be talking about a few of these cases in I think it's 3 examples. So first, why is this important also? Agronomists tend to run a lot of multi-environment G by M experimentation, and they do it 1 year and they find a result. They do it again next year, they find a different result. They say, oh, I have to do it again. And the main problem is that we keep on exploring a limited number of possible combinations. Every site and season is going to be different, and the G by E by M interactions are pretty common. So it becomes a bit of you're chasing always your tail because you are saying, oh, I need more data. So what we are saying here is that probably you don't need your data. Probably what is happening is that you're not analyzing that properly. So in this work that we are doing with SAGI, we are including environmental and simulated covariates, and mixed models to untangle these complicated G by E by M interactions. And what we hope to get out of that is one-stage statistical model that identifies key environmental covariates of G by E by M interactions to predict the performance of different genotypes in untested environments under contrasting management conditions, which is very much first. And just to give you an example on that, so we are going to be trying to untangle this E. What is this E? And in these cases, it's still site, season, time of sowing. And those covariates can be climate or soil derived covariates. It's a big list that we have included. At the same time, we are also using APSIM simulated covariates, like, for example, the stress type for a particular combination of treatments. So if a particular site like Gatton, you have this high frequency of ET1s and only a few of ET3s, which is ET1 is no stress, ET3 there is some stress, you can see that the combination of G by M can change that. You can have different combinations. So we are using these model derived, which is an ex post result that comes from simulating the trial, to be included in that mixed model. So what is this looking like at the moment? So in the model development, here we have a number of sites for two hybrids, Cracker and Basta, and it's a plot of yield versus established plant populations, and these are just the predictions of the model during model development. So what needs to happen for model development basically is you need to take one of those environmental covariants one at a time, put it into the mixed model and check if that improves or not the description of variability of the results. Then what you can also do, and you have to do, is to basically cross-validate the results of that model. So basically you take one site or one experiment out, and then you test your model on that experiment with the previous calibration. And that is basically the result. So it looks like the model during cross-validation is able to pick pretty much all those complex interactions that we have between the G and the E and the M across very different environments. However, the best test that you can do is just to have a fully independent or true validation where you test your model with a completely different data set from a different season on a very different site that you haven't used in the selection of the covariates. And this is where we are nowadays with progress. It's not looking too bad. It's still, we are able just to pick up the high yielding sites and the low yielding sites, but there is some work that needs to be done just to improve it. So in principle, what is this going to help with? This is going to help agronomists will have to collect relevant environmental covariates that that they're going to be later introduced in the mixed models when the analysis is analyzed by the statisticians. So, and that is something that we see that is going to increase the effectiveness of the agronomic research. You're going to need fewer trials just to be able to test your high ideas. And donors are probably going to be saving funds. The statisticians and modelers are going to have a lot of work because you're going to have to really collect all this new information associated to the variables that the agronomists usually collect. So I think this is really an important point because journals are already rejecting articles that do not have a proper analysis and description of what is the environment in G by E by M analysis. And this work is being championed by Michael Mumford from SAGI, and we have already an article that is at the Agronomy Conference and being prepared for publication. A second approach, and I keep coming back to this one, that is reminding us, we have all these agronomic work that we do, but what are the constraints? The constraint is that you are exploring usually a very limited number of combinations of G by E by M's because experiments are expensive and you cannot keep on doing that all your life, though some people do. And every site and season is different, and these interactions are just everywhere. You're going to find, you run these trials, you're going to find interactions. So in this case, what we are using is APSIM to extrapolate results across sites and seasons to derive measures of downside risk, for example. So from that quality data. We use the quality data just to make sure that APSIM, in this case APSIM maize, is able just to simulate the experiments and the trials that we have been running. And then we use APSIM to basically increase the landscape of possible combinations of G by E by M. And then we have basically, we're making sure the model is good, and then we can have a massive cloud of data that we can divide into tersols. I do like tersols because they are very simple, and I don't think that we need much more detail to really give an informed decision. So this information then can be used to derive rules of thumb. For example, in this case, those points are sitting here are basically resulting from the combinations of particular cultivars and particular densities and giving us those points down there. So that is really cool, but so what? Still we have a problem. The problem is that still we don't know much about the environment. So where is it going to be? It's going to be here. Do I have to use the rules for the high tersol? Do I have to use the rules for the middle tersol? Do I have to use the rules for the lower tersol? Because those rules are going to be all different. So, and that is the key question. So next step was basically to look at, okay, what variables we know? What is knowable? What is something that we can determine in the field at the time of planting that we can use just to say what is the likelihood of falling into each of those tersols? In this case, we have used climatology, and which is all the climate records we have in Australia, characterize the site, and the initial soil water at the time of planting. And what you can see is that using some neural networks, we can get down to give you what is the likelihood of falling into the lower tersol, that is less than 2 tons, upper tersol for this particular site at least, more than 4 tons, and the middle tersol somewhere in between. And you can see that, you know, when you have very little water, obviously chances of lower tersol increases. When you have a lot of water in the soil, the chances of upper tersol increases. And that is really cool. So what can we do next with that is basically to bring it together with farmers' risk attitude. So because you can have very different people. You can have very rational people that are going to say, okay, I'm always going to be following the highest probability rules. So if I have low initial soil moisture, it's telling me that I need to use the rules for the lower tersol. If not, I need to use the rules for the middle tersol or the rules for the upper tersol. But you might have people that says, now I'm confident I'm always going to be getting more than 4 tons in this particular environment. And then it's going to be always using those rules for the upper tersol. And we call them the high reward seeker. The other one was the rational. But also you can have someone called the middler that is going to be following the green line, irrespective. It's going to be saying, I'm always targeting these environments and I'm going to be always using those rules. And then you have the risk averse, someone that has particular levels of debt that is wanted to minimize risks. And in that case, is probably going to be following the rules associated to always expecting a poor season. So what happens if you do that dynamically? If you just follow the different rules, basically what you get is some benefits calculated here in terms of cumulative gross margins for about 10 years. And it's telling you that for this particular region, being a reward seeker or a bit of a rational farmer is going to give you a really good advantage in the better seasons, which is this tail of points down there. It's quite significant. It's more than 40% of the data. And if you are somewhere in between, so that is going to be, you're not going to reach the best benefits of the best seasons, but you're going to be okay in many of the good seasons, and it's going to be much better than being a risk-averse farmer than if you're sitting down there. So that is very much a type of application that you can have with that approach. The third and last example I just wanted to talk about is what happens if we can go a little bit fancier and we go and combine crop models with global circulation models, seasonal climate forecast, to inform optimum G by N combinations, which is a bit of a different paper. But very much what happens here is that we use, in that case, Programma 2, which is the previous model from the Met Bureau, to give us an ensemble of forecasts. And this model is supposed to take into account most of the climate drivers in Australia. We do know that has some good accuracy in across most of Australia, particularly in the south and eastward. And we selected a number of sites where we applied this model to try to answer with APSIM if there is any value in dollars per hectare in the use of seasonal climate forecasts and APSIM to inform these optimum combinations of G by M at the time of sowing. So I look at the forecast at the time of sowing, and it's going to tell me something about the environment. And then I use APSIM to tell me, okay, what is the best thing I can do to maximize my profits according to that prediction of the environment. So what are the results? The results are here, just simulated for a number of sites, Moree, Gandewindi, Dalby, and Capella, and 3 different soil types. Soil that has a high plant available water capacity, a medium, and a low at each of those sites. And we compare 2 scenarios. One is farmers' practice. This is present farmers' practice, and these are dollars per hectare per year. And we compare farmers' practice with the optimized result coming out of the combination of APSIM and the Programma model. And so the difference between this column and this column is the value in dollars, is how much money we can make if we follow those rules given by this model. And which is cool, it is quite a significant value, particularly if you compare that to, for example, improvements in ongoing improvement in yield in sorghum in Australia is about 44 kilograms per hectare per year. There is an incremental gain that comes from breeding, from improvements in agronomy, improvements in the cropping system, and that is about $300 per hectare for this, about $17 per hectare per year. So I think there is a lot of potential here. Now, what is interesting also to see is where this value comes from. Is this value coming from the setting up the model with the initial conditions, that value of initial soil moisture that I have used before, or is that coming from the seasonal climate forecast? So basically, very little at the moment is coming from the seasonal climate forecasting tool. Very little. The still is comparable to the incremental gain that we are achieving every year. And most of the value is really coming from climatology, understanding what is and knowing what is the initial conditions, which is very much what we have shown with a simpler model developed before using machine learning algorithms. And what I find really most interesting is that what happens if we have a crystal ball? What happens if we can predict the future? And if we can predict the future, if we can say exactly how is going to be the coming season, and adjusting the G by M to those conditions, we can say that very much we are sort of midway if we compare this column with that column. So there is a lot of gain that could be made from improving that value of seasonal climate forecasts. And so 2 things to take home from here. One is that there is a lot of potential to improve, and there are things that we can already do. There are things that we can already use to inform these decisions. New approaches that we are using right now, basically with Dong-Chu Sao, that is a postdoc in my team, that is predicting water use and water availability using 3D mapping of soil water using some sensing equipment that is called the Dual M21S. And what you can see here is that this is two dates, the same site. This is Nanhui, Sicily Plains. This was last year, and in December, and 15 days later, or about 10 days later, is that? And you can see in this trial, we have a number of irrigated and dryland randomized plots. And what this machine can tell us is how much water we have at different depths. We have at 0.5 meters, 1.5 meters down to 3 meters. At the moment, Dong-Chu is in the process of translating this apparent electric conductivity into millimeters of water. That is, and also is going to be inverting this information into a continuous variable so that we can interpolate between the different depths, hopefully. But it is really interesting to me that using this sort of sensing equipment very quickly, we can, if we have plots with different treatments in different areas in these fields that we do have, we can, by comparing two dates like this with no irrigation or no rainfall, we can say where the roots have been active and how active they have been, how much water they have been taking. And then you can derive all the values of water use efficiency and water use at different layers for different treatments very, very quickly, because using the dual M is just a survey instrument that you just drag with an ATV over your trial. So that is pretty cool, and it's coming. And something that I thought that was interesting also is the use of environmental prediction using machine learning. So in this article, they present the correlation skill for a number of the best global circulation models that are available, and a model that uses a convolutional neural network. Basically, what they did is they used transfer learning to train this convolutional neural network to predict what is likely to happen at seasonal conditions. And what is most interesting is that the forecast's lead goes up to 1.5 years. So when we only need very much, 6 months. Already at 6 months, it appears to be doing better than many of the GCMs. So it's another technique that is coming, and we hope that it can help inform that environment. Still, there is a way to go, because this is only predicting the El Nino 3.4 index. It's a bit far away to say something about rainfall. But there are other examples that for example, Google has developed a deep learning algorithm that is called MetNet that basically can give you a forecast for the next 8 hours. And here, this is comparing the algorithm on top with very much ground truthing values, which is quite amazing. So take-home messages, I guess, most important, matching the hybrid and the agronomy to site unexpected seasonal conditions does matter. It is important. We can double, triple values of water use efficiency if we get it right. The largest gains to be achieved in informing these G by M combinations is still our capacity to predict the value of E. There are ways and there are things that we can do. There are some low-hanging fruit that farmers and consultants can already be using, though products will require some co-design to make sure that we are answering the right questions, and the information is packaged and delivered in the right way, preferably by a commercial provider, service provider. So this is all I had for today, and I wanted just to thank the team and my collaborators. Most of the work on maize was done with Diego, and most of the work with sorghum was done with the rest of the team. And Dong Ju is doing all the analysis of the ULM, and I also thank PhD students and the graduate students that are helping us with our work. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Daniel, and that was great. I'll just remind people, if you have questions, to put them in the Q&A rather than in the chat. We've got a little bit of stuff in chat. Can you make sure you put your questions into Q&A? I'm going to kick off, Daniel, by asking. So I think we did discuss this a little bit last year. We were being told that we were going to get a La Nina, and that was going to be a wetter than average summer and autumn. But really that didn't happen too much in most of the grain growing belt in central Queensland and southern Queensland. At best, we probably got rainfall that maybe was a little bit like the long-term average. Do you think that's the future for us, or are we going to actually get some of those really wet years with good rainfall for cropping?
Well, you're going to get, obviously, you're going to get those extreme good years. But something that we are also expecting is that the high rainfall seasons are gonna come in small packages, in the sense even though the amount of rain might be high, it might come in a smaller number of events, which is a very significant issue, because that means that the intensity of the events is likely to increase, and that can have a number of consequences. Consequences involve not being able to capture all that rain into soils. Another consequence is going to be that if you are not able to capture all that rain that falls in a short period of time into soils, it's going to cause erosion and damage to landscapes. That is why it's the importance of having a systems approach. It's not just yield. Someone asked a question here on the chat about profits. Of course, it's not just yields. Everything needs to be translated into profitability. We did get down to gross margins. To get into profitability, I guess you need to add the fixed costs of the enterprise, but that is different for different places. So we keep on keeping things down to gross margins, just to easy communication. And the frequency and intensity of events is likely to increase, and we need to develop systems that are going to be able just to make the most of that.
Okay, thanks. You've already gone some way to answering Michael O'Shea's question that he put in the Q&A, but I would, to take that a bit further, I mean, to what extent does the grain price actually have an effect on farmers' attitude to risk?
The main driver for risk is debt and levels of equity. So in addition to personal preference and people's behavior, farms are very complicated systems because they have many components. But what really makes the system complex is just people, because different people are going to have very different attitudes, different values, different objectives. So risk is it's fascinating, and the best thing that we can do in our work is just to try to provide to quantify what are the benefits, but also what are the risks of change in practice. That is what we try to do.
Okay, we've got another question coming from Ian. It's not me, but it's just Ian, so I don't know who. But it says, how do you see use of this to design site management to hold more soil water, and so to change the E factor, especially for further north where the variability in E is greater?
Yes, it's a good question. It's a big problem. When we started, for example, our early sown sorghum or winter sown sorghum, the key driver for that was just to get a crop out of the field early in January, so that farmers could store some moisture in the short fallow during the summer, and then go back immediately with double crop into winter crop. It could be a high value crop, could be a chickpeas, but apparently that is dramatically changing. And the main objective of many farmers these days is just to try to get as early as possible so that they can produce some biomass, particularly coming out of this long and extended drought that has basically, and the pickup of crops like chickpea that it leaves very, very little ground cover. So building biomass has a lot of money into it. And because that is what is going to let you harvest that rainfall and go for your follow next crop. So yeah, and as you go north, it's extremely important. So particularly because soils up in the north, in the case of the Gilbert, they have very sandy, loamy soil textures that are they have a very poor infiltration in the top layer, and it's very difficult to get all that rain infiltrating, because the rain tends to come also in few events that are of high intensity, and that is why we have so many rivers running and lushing up in the north, because we are not able just to capture that much water with land that, given the soil texture and the management, is rather degraded. So the main regenerative activity on those soils is about increasing soil infiltration. One of the options is to grow intercrops or relay crops between forages and grain crops like sorghum and desmanthus, that they have very different rooting systems and are able just to generate channels and slow the movement of water and increase infiltration. So there are things that we can do, but you also have in the middle cattle that tend to graze quite heavily on those landscapes.
Yep, okay. So we've got another question from Yash Chauhan, who says, great presentation. So Yash wants you and him to tell breeders what to do, because he says, do you think breeders should focus more on improving responsive genotypes to agronomy rather than environment, and environment can be better handled using your approach?
Good question, and I'm going to...
You could start a turf war here, you've got to be careful.
Not that I know top of my head what to say to Yash. He's a smart guy, and we can have a chat about that. But yeah, it's I for this presentation I wanted just to untangle the influence or the variability coming from the G and the variability coming from the M. I didn't have time. This presentation was put very, very rapidly. I didn't know it was presenting, so, but I'll do it for the next one. And I think I can discuss. We can have a chat about Yash. I would be happy just to write something up with that. It's a good question.
Okay, we've got another one from Kirikun Songsombun, who also liked your talk and then says, to my understanding, most of the prediction, especially for environment, is very effective for a short cycle of agronomic crops. What about longer cycle of horticultural crops or trees? How can we use cumulative effects from E and M in a longer setting, for example, 5 to 10 years?
Usually climatologists, they use different models for different things. So the model we use for very short predictions of so the weather model that you look in your app all the time that's telling you the temperature for the next week is different from the model that is used just to say something about the next 3 months. And I can imagine that the model to say something about next year is also going to be different. The approach that machine learning has shown here, it appears to give you a skill and good information after 1.5 years, which is quite amazing, quite surprising. And still, that information is about ENSO, it's not about rain. Though, but I think that is something that we need to keep on watching, because I think it is progressing very, very rapidly, and we don't know where that's going to take us.
Yeah, I can. There's been discussion, particularly in the plant breeding world, because of climate change, and particularly when it comes to when it comes to the carbon dioxide content. So when you make a first cross, if you're not going to be releasing lines commercially until maybe 10 years later, when you made the cross and started doing your early generation selection, the climate's it's already different. And so from a management point of view, do you believe that in that whole G by E by M space, is there a place where basically being able to produce more rapid turnover from breeding programs might actually be necessary from the point of view of understanding and overcoming those climatic changes?
Could be. The only worry I have is that hybrids are cycling pretty quickly these days already, except for those that have proven to really be pretty solid for the last 20 years, that remain being some of the very good sellers. I think my personal impression is that our seed systems are pretty small, and I would imagine that seed companies are going to have a lot of trouble providing a lot of different lines, different materials that are going to have better adaptation to particular environments, because we're going to have a bigger segregation of environments. Already having environments up in the north that are extremely hot and extremely variable, and with very big intervals between rainfall events, and with the incidence of new pests and the new even probably new diseases. So I don't know how only the G is going to be coping with such a big responsibility. I think we should be working probably, I'm not saying smarter, I'm not smarter than anyone else, but a little bit better in the sense of how we can develop packages or sets of traits and managements that are better suited to particular environments, and that is not something coming from the G's. It has to be a multidisciplinary work. It has to work also with the M. At the end, all the materials are usually tested at one single plant population, single planting time. Our work with winter sown sorghum, we find that we have very little variability in cold tolerance, and the main problem we have is just on seed lot variability. So I reckon that I don't know how you guys are going to do it, but it would be really good together than just running different ways, because I think the systems approach can also benefit the breeders.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we saw in the 90s that new sorghum hybrids were all given Mitch ratings, for example, which helped farmers in their selection. But we haven't really moved much beyond that. So I mean, apart from selling your grain and your seed and saying it's an early variety or it's an early mid or whatever, there's not a lot of information that that growers and agronomists can actually use. I mean, you talked about the water at depth, and I don't think anyone's actually looked at the current suite of hybrids to talk about what sort of variability there is, if any, in their ability to actually access water at depth.
Look, there are good examples, and I think they have been pioneering examples. And coming from Iowa with the Pioneers, breeding program, and we have Mark Cooper that developed or participated heavily on that. So I think there are good examples of how a systems perspective can be used also in the development and piling up of these traits, with really good participation of farmers in the design and adoption of the final products.
Yep. I did have another question about the sort of the on-farm management side of things. I mean, what sort of tools are available to farmers to realistically get an idea of what their soil water content is, particularly at depth? Is there technology? I mean, you've got technology, for example, that you've been utilising, but that's not a cheap undertaking. Are there tools that are readily available at the moment for farmers to use to be able to understand that?
There are cheaper tools, and we do have services that are starting to provide those mapping. Maybe not able just to layer the soil in so many layers, but there is available cheaper equipment, and I'm pretty confident that there are services already being provided for that, though with probably a different objective, just to understand a little bit of subsoil constraints, or to understand a little bit about precision farming, rather than say something about the optimum G by N combination. Having said that, we also have companies that are producing planting equipment, precision planters that could carry more of a hybrid. So it can carry a couple of hybrids and have some contrasting characteristics. It's low tillering, high tillering, that they do not vary that much. Let's say a shorter cycle, a longer cycle will be more relevant, and that could be matched to some zoning of big fields, and then on the go you can basically change your G, and you can change your hybrid, but you can change your density, you can change your nutrition, you can change your planting depth, so all those things just from the cabin of the tractor. And those are probably things that we can think of supporting and informing with these technologies. Okay, so unless anyone else has got a question that they want to ask, you've got a few moments to get that into the chat. Otherwise, we're going to, sorry, not into the chat, I should correct myself, into the Q&A. I'd just like to thank you very much, Daniel, for your talk. That was great. And also to remind people that the Coffee Science seminars are an ongoing thing. We've already got another one scheduled for next week. Wait on, we might have had, no, have we got another? Okay, so that someone anonymous has said, adding to Ian's question, do you think regional recommendation is sufficient to go beyond to a case-by-case approach?
or sorry, do you think regional recommendation is sufficient, or should we go beyond this to a case-by-case approach?
There are for sure recommendations that are better adapted for particular regions. That is clear. But as soon as you recognize that, how much soil water you have, how is the fertility of the field, there is a different level of detail that you can go down to, just to narrow down or go with more detail into adjust those recommendations. What is the benefit of the next step? I don't know, but at least having, in particular, because the extreme climate variability that we are exposed to, I think there must be a base sort of regional recommendation that could be delivered, but also we need to understand that we are managing a very variable climate, and that there might be benefits from profiting from that variability by adjusting a little bit the G by M.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Daniel. I'll just get you to advance to the next slide so I can make a pitch for next week's. Okay, so next week we've got Dr. Araz Solman, who's a plant pathologist from Dept. He's based in Hermitage, and he's going to give a talk called "A Tale of Two Crop Diseases." So, thank you very much for those of you who attended, and look forward to seeing you again next week. And thanks again, Daniel.
Thank you, everybody.